Welcome to another episode of Fortinet Live. I'm Rick Peters, the CISO for Operational Technology for North America. And today I'm joined by David Cahoon. He's the Chief Technology Officer of Red Bison Technologies Group. And, we're here to chat about topics that are a favorite of both of ours, and that's business activity and cybersecurity concerns relating to digitally connected buildings, campuses, and even cities. Welcome, David.
Rick, thanks for having me on today. Look forward to the conversation.
Oh, likewise. Let's go right in. Let's dive into our favorite areas of topics of conversation. And I'll start by asking you a question. It's kind of a good level set segue. How about telling us a little bit about trends that impact your industry and some context as what is key for those who may not really be familiar with this space?
Yeah, so Red Bison has a network as a service that we provide to high-rise buildings, multi-tenant unit, multi-family units, apartments, condominiums, typically in larger cities, but we're doing mid-cities as well. But what we're seeing today, we had COVID and everybody left the office. So everybody was working from home and there wasn't a lot of people in these types of buildings. And now they're all coming back. And so one of the trends we're seeing is how do we attract these people back into our building, but how do we do it securely? How do we do it safely? How do we make that technology experience really attractive for people to come back into the office? Because some will come back full time. Some are going to come back a hybrid. They're going to be in some time and at home still. And then there's going to be people that are going to remote logging in and doing things like that. So that space now has really transformed from a very bespoke outcome inside a building to now being a more seamless, holistic type network that really adds a value to not only the building, but to the tenants. And whether that be for family units, people living in their apartments or condominiums, and just supporting if they're at a business and how they do that. So we're seeing to make that those safety measures and do things, touchless access, touchless screens, touchless elevators, and all of these are like OT, IoT type sensory type systems and applications now that are being put in buildings. And all this is adding a tremendous amount of attack surface when we add all of these components on this network. So one of the things we do with Fortinet is bring in the ability to look at a single fabric, a security fabric that gives us a holistic view and really simplifies that architecture so a property owner can do a lot of wonderful things with his building, with the current things he has, with the future applications he's going to need. And more importantly, all these IoT and OT sensors, because frankly, there's a lot of concern on the security of all these things they're doing. Great things will happen in buildings. Some cool things will happen. But how do you actually secure that solution? So those are some of the major trends we're seeing as people are coming back into buildings.
Yeah, it's interesting. It sounds like a lot of discovery, clearly, right? And post-pandemic, the stakes are higher, right? We're trying to figure out what that new normal is going to look like, and certainly connected buildings and all the infrastructure and the systems of systems pose a great challenge. And I think balancing in that is trying to improve the customer experience as well. What's top of mind, though, in terms of supporting your business as a technology leader at Red Bison?
As a network, as a service company, that network at the end of the day is the nervous system in all the building for us. When we look at IoT and OT security right now, we want to be able to segment those segments into areas that make sense for a business. First of all, it's still got to operate. We'll talk a little bit maybe about the zero trust architecture and some of the things that Fortinet's now doing with zero trust. But those types of activities, the network and all of these other applications in IoT and OT and different sensors that we put in a building, being able to make those work and secure those technologies in a manner that makes sense, because they still got to operate and it's got to be a way that people can consume them. is really top of my mind.
I like that analogy about the nervous system. That's the first time I've heard it in the context of OT, but I like it because I think it is a great illustration of the dependence of the different, formerly disconnected, but now we know very connected, whether directly or not. We understand that it poses a different kind of an attack surface, right? So it's a lot to keep track of. With that in mind, what cybersecurity trends are top priority for you?
When we talk about a building and some things that have happened to buildings, let me talk a little bit about some of the attacks that have happened against buildings. They've gone and attacked elevators so they don't work. So now not being able to use your elevator, you now can't get to your office, you can't get to your apartment. That's a huge outage for a property owner. People don't want to have that in their building. So activists and bad actors and people like that are doing that. They're attacking these elevators and making them not work in an expected manner. They're turning on even a more destructive way. They're turning on the fire systems, fire alarm systems, breaking into those and turning water on. And so now you have this huge multi-million-dollar restoration happening in a building because somebody with their IoT or OTs got access into those systems and did that. Same thing with shutting down heating and temperature and cooling. You don't want the AC not working in summer, and you definitely want the heat working on in winter. But these are the kind of attacks we see in buildings nowadays. And being able to separate, segment, and secure those is top of mind for everybody. They want, as a property owner or property management team, that maintaining leases and maintaining those customers or tenants inside their building is their their highest priority. And making sure that the building operates in an expected manner is really key. So having the ability to take a look at every one of those platforms connected through that nervous system, segment them, put controls around them, and then be able to get feedback from them from analytics, that is huge for us as the network providers. And more importantly, those property owners are seeing that, that those attacks today are not diminishing. They're gaining today. So that is a huge thing for us.
Yeah, that's very familiar ground, right? You echoed an abiding principle of most operational technology leaders, and that is safety and continuous trusted operations at all times. That's just sort of the overarching gotta have. And now we're thinking about it from the standpoint of building that trust with property owners and the tenants, right? So it's sort of top to bottom, making sure that we are delivering the kind of assurance that they can trust those systems. And I love the ones you named because that's just all the stuff you would expect to work. Let's pivot for a second and talk a little more specifically about the proliferation of edges and devices and data. How does that affect your overall cyber strategy?
Yeah. Data is growing at exponential numbers today. The more devices we put out there, I don't know what the latest one, 20 billion, 30, 40, I don't know. It's billions of devices that are increasing every year. And so they all create data. That data goes somewhere. And so your HVAC, your AC systems, your heating systems, your cooling systems, your lighting systems, your EV systems, electronic vehicle systems, all of those things are all creating data all day long. And they're in all of these buildings. Every part of those have data. Forget the IT. We haven't even mentioned anything about IT inside a building. Let's just talk about the sensors. But all of that data is moving around. And so securing that edge is huge. We put FortiGates inside our buildings for a really good reason. We want to definitely be able to have some segmentation inside that building. More importantly, we want to have all that, malware detection, intrusion prevention, intrusion detection systems, just next generation firewall services. All of those things have to be there. And then protecting the data, how do we put in the control systems to actually protect data? Because people are moving that hybrid. A lot of people were in the cloud for a while. We had data centers, and now we have this hybrid where there's edge, and people are using a lot of edge inside buildings. So, yeah, it's a huge point we look at. we definitely want it to be secure, and there are definitely ways of doing that better in a building today than previously has been done.
Yeah, I'm pleased to hear you amplify this focus on data, right? It's clearly the commodity of interest from a number of parties, right? Obviously, the property owner and the tenants who have expectations of performance and intelligence and information that improves their experience, whether it's a residence or commercial property, and likewise the growth and the dependence, right, on the infrastructure continues to just expand. I think the last time I looked, just for operational technology alone, we knew we would exceed over 4 billion devices in the next 2 to 3 years. So that growth's not going anywhere but up. And I'm glad to hear that you're really focused on that, because I think we forget that it is about protecting the intelligence, the information, the data, whether it's at rest or in transit. It's a 24/7 continuous trust assessment job. Hey, let's talk about the threat landscape a little more. How does the shifting threat landscape today impact your cyber strategy?
Yeah, so again, one of the big reasons Red Bison chose Fortinet was its platform. That security fabric that gave us the ability to operationalize our security from a single point of view. And more importantly, when we do patching and when we do updates and we do these other types of activities, when we do things, we've set a policy and we send it out. And it sends it to every one of our systems because we're a Fortinet shop. That alone, in my 35 years being a security kind of guy, military and government, and now the civilian world, that alone, not having to have an army of 30 people trying to figure out 28 different systems because one patch broke 6. Now we got to go patch 16 other things, and then we have to regress test 4 other things and do 16.5. It just got to the point where it just didn't make sense. So for us, having that fabric, being able to be confident about a policy change or an update or a patch within the entirety of our structures, and we cloud-base that thing because we have multiple buildings, and we can just push a button, and it simplifies our operations tremendously. So that was probably, when I look at the threat landscape, why we did some of the things we did, and where we were going to spend our time and how much capital we were going to spend in there. Because the less human capital, the more we can invest in our network and in our ability to please customers. And so that was a huge win for us by using this platform.
It's interesting. I'd say the equilibrium of an ecosystem's ability to adapt is really important. I heard you kind of almost infer that, right? You have to be agile, adaptable, be able to continue to provide the kind of platform readiness, because we know the domain is going to change. It's very dynamic, right? That's the very nature of what we're talking about: connected buildings, connected campuses. We know it's not static. So I think that's a great catch. Hey, a final question here I'd like to ask is, how would you advise your peers when it comes to securing the evolution of the edge going forward?
It's first of all, I think the realization it's become a very complex place now. I think that's the first understanding, is it's become complex. When I came from high tech, and then I was like, well, how can a building be high tech? It's got a heating and lighting. It's become high tech. Those buildings are much more technology savvy, and much more technologies inside those places. So just the first fact of it, admit that they're complex. Second thing is that when you're looking at infrastructure and architecture and all the things, make sure security is part of that. And I recommend Fortinet, but hey, make sure that you have some security architect type person with you when you're looking at your infrastructure and architecture. Even though there's a lot of cool whiz things out there, hey, I can do mood lighting, I can do, my shades control, and I can do all sorts of facial stuff, and all these things are great. But if they're not secure and they're attacked and you can't use them and they don't have expected outcomes, that is not a win. So I guess, simplistically, plan your architecture accordingly, with not only the infrastructure, but the security involved with it. and do it in a holistic manner when you're doing it. And then take a look at long term. What are you trying to achieve? Because as you mentioned earlier, that was a great catch. It's not static. This place changes every day. The attack vectors are changing every day. Things are going to change. So having that forethought of what does my infrastructure look today and tomorrow? What's my security going to look like today and tomorrow? And how can I do simplifications of it? Because you can't spend all your day looking at only one node. There's many.
And well, I really appreciate your vision and your willingness to kind of put yourself out there, because obviously we can expect a whole lot more. And it's a privilege today to be able to have a conversation with a subject expert like you from Red Bison as we explore, right, the road ahead in improving operational technology and the services that we must have in that part of the large array of verticals that are our cyber physical. Everyone, thank you for taking the time today to join us and listen in on this conversation with David and I. We look forward to the next conversation in the future. This has been Fortinet Live.